Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the foreign relations file for Egypt. This in light of Egypt actually participating in the Pan-African Parliamentary Body in South Africa these last few days. Also, we're going to be focusing on not just the African relations, but also the international relations, where Egypt is now standing among the international community. And joining us here in the studio to shed more light on this issue is Ambassador Dr. Samir Borhan, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Ambassador Dr. Borhan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our discussion, let's check out this report regarding Egypt participating in the Pan-African Parliamentary Body, and we'll be right back.
An Egyptian parliamentary delegation is currently attending the sessions of the Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa, which began on Monday and will last for the coming few days. The delegation is led by Member of Parliament Hatem Bashat, head of the Specialized Internal Committee of the African Countries Affairs, along with members from the committee. MPs May Mahmoud and Mustafa Gindi represent Egypt at the conference from May 2nd to May 13th. Parliament Speaker Ali Abdel Al was sworn in and delivered a speech before the Pan-African Parliament in a step to formally announce Egypt's return to the membership of the Parliament after a 3-year freeze. In his speech, Abdel Al expressed Egypt's confidence that the Pan-African Parliament would play a key role in achieving sustainable development, integration, and combating terrorism. He said that Egypt's efforts would not be confined boosting development in the region, but will also cover other fields. The Parliament Speaker said that Egypt's foreign policy aims to enhancing the relations with African countries and seeking to settle conflicts peacefully. He noted that Egypt is also determined to combat terrorism and extremism. Abdel Al is accompanied by a parliamentary delegation which is participating in the ongoing Pan-African Parliament meetings in South Africa, which are due to continue until May 6. The Parliament recently voted for the heads of its specialized internal committees to expand the regulatory review of the Parliament. The new committees that were added include those that focus on African countries' affairs, small and medium-sized enterprises, higher education, scientific research, and media. The Peace and Security Council in the suspended Egypt's membership following the ouster of the Muslim Brotherhood regime in July 2013. The PAP, legislative organ of the African Union, held its inaugural session in March 2014. It aims to ensure the full participation of African peoples in the development and economic integration of the continent. The PAP exercises oversight and has advisory and consultative powers lasting for the first 5 years.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Kicking off our discussion, Ambassador Dr. Borhan. Now, first of all, Egypt is participating in the Pan-African Parliament after a 3-year break, after the ouster of former President Mohamed Morsi. Now, how important is it to actually be reintegrated within the Pan-African Parliament? What is the difference? I mean, the past 3 years, we were not really part of the Pan-African Parliament. Now we are. Should we expect more African relations within this body? Should we expect a change, a significant change in the Egyptian-African relations?
Thank you very much for this very important question. I think after the attempt on the life of the ex-president Mubarak in Addis Ababa, I think Egypt attempted to withdraw from its African burden. So I think the African policy or the Egyptian policy towards Africa has been a little bit backwarded. So by the coming into the African theater, I think this is very important for Africa before Egypt, because Egypt is a very important country in Africa. Egypt is one of the very important co-founders of the African Union. The African, the people's diplomacy, not the official one, I mean, not those of diplomats belonging to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but the people's diplomacy represented by the parliamentarians, by the NGOs. All those are very important to enhance the image of Egypt, or to enhance the image of any country in its atmosphere. And our atmosphere and our space of breathing is Africa and the Arab world. So it is very, very important to come back to Africa, to put hands with the African countries, I mean sister countries, so that we can push forward the African causes in the United Nations after we have been elected as non-permanent representative in the Security Council of the UN. So I think the African policy of Egypt is taking impetus to go forward and to enhance and encourage the image of Egypt as one of the most important African countries in the continent.
Yes. Well, Parliament Speaker Ali Abdel actually mentioned that the Egyptian Parliament with the Pan-African Parliament will be discussing ways of developing parliamentary cooperation between both bodies, talking about combating extremism, economic and political development. Now, when we say cooperation on the parliamentary level, how different is it than cooperation government to government? What is the nature of parliamentary cooperation? How different is it from a cooperation within the African Union or the Arab League? What should we expect through the parliament cooperation?
This is another forum to move in diplomacy or in the international relationship. So I think the parliamentarians play a very important role in checking and control in the government. So if the government wanted to pass a resolution or a law, the parliamentarian can pass it or stop it. So I think if by encouraging the policy of the parliamentarians and the cooperation with the parliamentarians among the African parliaments in Africa, I think this would be some kind of check and balance on the African governments. Sometimes the African governments can go against this cause or that cause, and think if the parliamentarians are convinced that the cause is for the benefit of Africa, and I think they can coerce the government to go their way. So the parliamentarians are representative of the people. So I think now we are the spread of democracy in Africa and in other various regions of the world. I think this is very important to keep contact with the other parliamentarians, other parliaments in the African continents or in other continents as well, in Europe, Asia, the Arab world. So I think it is a very good step, and by representing the Egyptian delegation by its president, Dr. Ali Abdel I think. So it is very important. That means that we are very keen to have cooperation. We are keen to represent, to send an important delegation headed by the Speaker of the Parliament in Egypt. So I think this is a good eminence that Egypt is keen to cooperate with Africa, is keen to enhance its African image, it's keen to encourage African development, is keen to enhance African cooperation, and we are in a position in the United Nations to defend African causes.
Yes. So, in a way, do African parliaments have some sort of an influence on each other? And is there a thin line between an influence on each other and some sort of interference within each other's parliaments and affairs?
I don't think that way, because even Dr. Al-Mahgoub had said the parliament is Sayyid Qararu, is the master of his own decisions.
Yes.
So I think this is a very good rule. No parliament could interfere in the other affairs of another parliament in the African Union. But the key word is cooperation. Keyword is cooperation in different causes, in different spheres of international relations, or even to enhance the image of Africa as a continent towards towards Europe, towards the Asia and other countries. And I think in the International Parliamentary Union, I think if we are, one stand in Africa, I think this will also influence the other parliamentarians from other continents. So I think this is very important to enhance African causes, to African interest vis-a-vis the other parliamentarians.
Yes. Well, you mentioned that Egypt being part of the Pan-African Parliament is another sort of format of African cooperation alongside with the African Union and the Arab League, for instance. But how effective will it be in the political developments and the international decision-making politically, especially within the African continent, especially that there are a lot of crises and very critical situations within the Middle East and Africa. We've seen the Arab League and the African Union condemning a lot of hostilities, condemning a lot of actions and decisions being made right, left and center. But how effective will this cooperation be, the parliamentary cooperation?
I think by encouraging the cooperation, the collaboration between the Africans, if we say that African parliaments, African decision makers, or whatever, or African policies, this is one step forward. A long road starts by one step. So I think if we, after 30 years of withdrawn and sleeping down on leaving the Africans to go their way, and we are outside African mainstream causes, I think it was a mistake, and we are trying to right up the mistake we had made. So I think this is very important that we come back to Africa, we encourage our image, we see the African cooperations, and on the other hand, the Africans look up to Egypt as a very important country. The three main important countries in Africa, in my humble opinion, is Nigeria in the west, Egypt in the north, and South Africa in the south. So maybe Tanzania in the east, maybe, or Uganda, or whatever it is. So this is a chair with four legs. So it is very important that at least those three important countries cooperate with each other and get in contact in daily or in constant cooperation and the relationship between each other.
Yes. Well, Egypt, since the 2011 and 2013 revolutions, has really been through a roller coaster ride, and really now Egypt is being established as once again a major player within the Middle East and the African continent. But the Egyptian parliament is a relatively new parliament, and we're still finding our way within this parliament, and we're still discussing and debating programs and the cabinet and many decrees being discussed. How effective or how strong do you think the Egyptian parliament will be when it is participating in this international parliamentary bloc?
This is a hard question. I don't want to, to criticize our parliamentarians, but I think we have new personalities in this new parliament of ours. Those new personalities have no back experience or backward experience. So I think by enhancing the experience of the parliamentarians, by giving them I mean, backgrounds about each cause, about each policy. So try to teach them in a way. I don't want to teach them as pupils or as students, but I just to clarify the policies that Egypt has made or Egypt is going to make in the future. So I think by supporting by the support of the parliamentarians to the government and to the other causes of Africa, I think this would be a good step forward. And that means that the parliamentarians should cooperate with the government in a way in our Egyptian government, and in the other side on their colleagues in the other parliamentarians.
Yes, definitely. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now joined over the phone by Mr. Mohammed Al-Khouli, the international media expert. Hello, Mr. Khouli, can you hear us? Mr. Khouli, can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I hear it.
Mr. Khouli, first of all, the Egyptian parliament is participating in the Pan-African Parliament, really taking its place again after a 3-year break. Many are really seeing this as a positive step in terms of really establishing an all-rounded Egyptian identity within the African relations and the international community as well. How much do you feel this can be one way or another medium to use by the Egyptian government in speaking to the rest of the African nations? Probably one way is through the Arab League, another is through the African Union, and now through the African parliaments. And really, how do you see this as a new way or another way of addressing the other African nations?
Well, you have referred to 23rd July revolution, and that revolution represented a kind of a turning point in our foreign policy, which before that concentrated on the West. And after the 23rd July revolution, I think there was this talk about the three circles. First of all is the Arab circle, and then the African circle, and then the Islamic circle. Well, we will not repeat what happened at that time, but I think this thing means that still we have to believe that Egypt is a role country. We don't have a lot of oil, we don't have a lot of coal, we don't have a lot of iron, but we have a lot of history, of skills, and of a kind of determination to play this role. First of all, we have to play the role in the Middle East, but now I think the Middle East is now, as you know, it's a bombed field, and we have to be very cautious when we are taking our course in the Middle East. I think Africa still is a kind of an open space in which we can resume our role and try to fill the gap, which is now 40 years old, since the 70s until yesterday, in which we neglected Africa at the expense of our interests and at the expense of the interests of our African fellows or colleagues or even brothers. You see, and today I think we have resumed something as the latest news that we sent the army, sent an aid, food aid to what they call our brothers in South Sudan. This is an important thing, but it should be part of a policy, a whole overall policy of restoring our relations, not only our diplomatic relations, but relations in the companionship of development for the African nations, as far as we could do during the 60s and the 70s, in which we had a lot of representatives, commercial, economic, teachers, Al-Azhar people, the Coptic church people. All this, it was a kind of an overall effort, very cautious, stemming from our belief that our destiny is one with our African people. This should happen again, but not only as far as our foreign policy is concerned, not only exclusively in Africa, but we should also look at people in Latin America, in the Far East. All these are peoples who live the same circumstances as far as Egypt is concerned. And I think from my very modest experience in Africa itself, I lived a whole year in Africa, from Ethiopia until the Niger, and even Latin America. These people, I think, can welcome us because they feel that we don't have any imperialistic history. They can open their hearts for us, but at the same time, they can share their interests, their dreams as third world countries with the Egyptian people in this stage.
Mr. Khouli, now you are an international media expert. Now, how is this seen by the international media? The Egyptian parliament returning back to the Pan-African Parliament. Is this something that is noticeable by the international media? Do they take notice of such a move? Is it not as significant as other developments that Egypt is taking in other areas and other arenas?
Let me be very frank, you see. Well, the presence of our delegation in Johannesburg is so good. It's a positive step. That's because we are regaining, after 3 years of seclusion and isolation, we are regaining our position in the African Parliament. This is so good. But I think this is a step. We have to have, as I told you, a comprehensive policy vis-à-vis Africa. In the same time, I think the Africans will be again attracted to Egypt, not only through these diplomatic or even political steps, but when they know, they are become aware of what's going on the Egyptian soil. I mean that we have a lot of projects for development. Look at the Al-Farafra project, look at the Al-Jalala project in the Red Sea, other projects. All these things can be emulated by the Africans. In the same time, can be are subjects of admiration and appreciation by the Africans. In the same time, they are schools in which the Africans and even the Egyptians, architects, labormen, workmen, skilled labor, can be exported to share or to participate in the African efforts for the development of the African nations. It is a very comprehensive effort, and the politics is just one line in this respect as far as what's going on in Johannesburg now. But what the politician can say should be translated into work, development, projects on the ground.
Mr. Mohammed Al-Khouli, the international media expert, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Ambassador Dr. Borhan, now, a lot of issues have been really mentioned during the speech of our Egyptian Parliament Speaker Ali Abdel in South Africa, talking about a lot of developmental projects, talking about infrastructure, talking about cooperation, political and economic one, and also talking about combating terrorism. Now, talking about combating terrorism, we have to talk about the Syrian crisis, we have to talk about Daesh, all the extremists and all the conflicts, and Libya as well. So all of these issues, very, very timely, and they've been ongoing for a while now. But how would the Egyptian Parliament and the Pan-African Parliament be most effective? Would it be in these combating terrorism issues and the crises in Syria and Libya, or would it be regarding the infrastructure and the development and the passing of laws and decrees and sharing the experiences among the African countries? How do you think this cooperation would be most effective?
The main role of the parliamentarians is to issue decisions and to issue laws. And by the law, they can cooperate with the government in their own country, thereof, I mean, to pass the cooperation or to encourage cooperation with other countries. This is one thing. But the main thing in my humble opinion is that no development without safety, without securing the internal front inside each country. We cannot put infrastructure or and we are threatened by terrorism. So I think in my opinion, if the Africans stand against the terrorism, I think this is especially in the case of African country, very important African country, Libya. Libya is now no government, no army, no parliament, and I think even the Libyan government is now backwarded even before the Senussi era. So I think this is very important that we stand against terrorism. Then the second step will be building the infrastructure, building the cooperation with each African government. And because I think now not only Libya is threatened, but other countries, southern Sudan as well, some other countries in the West, Chad, Boko Haram in Nigeria.
Yes.
So I think not only in Nigeria, Boko Haram not only in Nigeria, it is in Nigeria, in Niger, in other West African countries. Yes. So I think the most important that the Africans should stand, have a unified policy towards terrorism. So if they can eradicate terrorism from Africa, I think this is a very major step. To receive investments, to build infrastructure, to build houses, to build schools, to build hospitals and other. But by threatening each government by international terrorism or internal terrorism, which are in cooperation with each other, I think this is very important to the fight against terrorism should take a first step.
Yes. So Your Excellency saying that first things first, we need to guarantee the security and stability within the African continent. And needing to do that, we'll need to address combating terrorism in countries like Nigeria, Niger, Libya, and so on and so forth. The decisions being made regarding these crises and these extremists, will it be taken by the African Union and the Arab League and then supported by the Pan-African Parliament? Or do you think the Pan-African Parliament would be able to actually enforce or really force its own decisions and then maybe get the support from the other institutions?
I think this is governmental cooperation first. Government to government cooperation, because the government is the body or the organ who put the plans and the policies to fight terrorism. So if the African governments in the African Union as a major forum would cooperate and pass resolutions and take decisions to fight terrorism in each country or in each country threatened by terrorism, and we can even have some kind of African forces, if we can put that as the Arabs or the Islamic countries has put by the initiative of King Salman. I think if we can have some kind of African forces to fight terrorism, because terrorism is transnational across the borders of each country. So if the African forces, if we can put that in action, I think this would be a major step to fight terrorism across the borders of each African country.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is also not only looking to influence its own political decisions on the Middle East and the African continent and help take the positive route towards security and stability. Egypt is also heading the UN Security Council this month May. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Egypt will head the UN Security Council in May, vowing to push African issues forward and put the spotlight on security challenges facing the international community. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ahmed Abu Zaid said in a statement that Egypt would handle several important regional issues such as the Palestinian cause and the crises in Libya, Syria and Yemen, in addition to African conflicts. Foreign Minister Samir Shukri will go to New York from 9th to 11th of May to head a ministerial session in the UN Security Council about counter-terrorism efforts, according to the statement. Shukri is expected to hold bilateral meetings with the international officials. Egypt won a seat in the UN Security Council last October after winning 179 votes out of 193. It is the only Arab country that currently holds a seat in the international institution. The United Nations is now involved in the peace processes in Libya, Syria and Yemen as it backs a peace talks aiming to end conflicts in the three Arab countries.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Egypt will now be heading the UN Security Council this month in May. Your Excellency, Ambassador Dr. Borhan, we have been really wanting so much to take a non-permanent seat in the UN Security Council, and we got it. And now we're actually heading the UN Security Council this month. So what are we going to do about it? What are the issues we're going to discuss? What are we going to try and fight for? What are the cases that we want to make Egypt now, after going through two revolutions, political turmoils and economic hardship, and going through a roller coaster ride, really, dealing with a lot of crises in the African continent, in the Middle East, being part of the fight against Daesh in Libya, being part of a coalition fighting the Houthi rebels in Yemen. What are we actually going to talk about? Now that we're actually heading this UN Security Council, what can we do about it?
I think the President of the Security Council has a little role to play in preparing the agenda for the Security Council. The body who is responsible, main responsibility of the making the agenda is the Secretariat of the United Nations. So the Secretariat put all the issues before the Security Council and the issues before the General Assembly. So the President of the Security Council is some kind of managing the deliberations between the 15 countries of either permanent or non-permanent in the Security Council. But Egypt is a very important country in the international arena. So we can push forward the Arab causes, especially the Palestinian cause, the situations in Libya, Sudan, Syria, South Sudan, and all the Arab issues. We can influence the secretaries to put these issues on the agenda. It is very hot issues and it is very important. So by putting them in the front of the international, problems or causes, I think Egypt can play a very good role in this matter. On the other hand, I think by deliberations between, in the corridors, or deliberations in the corridors, in the coulisses, in French.
The sidelines of it,
So I think we can influence even the permanent members of the Security Councils to support, to give support to this cause or that cause, because the President of the Security Council has a moral prestige to influence the causes, to influence the debate, you see, and even if we can influence the Secretariat, of course, to put causes which are not on the agenda at the moment. So this is a very important issue. I received this from this country or that country. We support it and we can cooperate with the other members of the Security Council, either permanent or non-permanent, to put this agenda. So I think we are in a very critical situation to influence the causes of Africa or the causes of the Arabs.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now joined over the phone by Dr. Mona Makram Abeid, the former Member of Parliament and Professor of Political Science at the American University in Cairo. Dr. Abeid, can you hear us?
Yes.
Dr. Abeid, first of all, now Egypt is heading the UN Security Council this month. How much of a big step do you feel that is? How influential do you think Egypt will be heading this UN Security Council in this such a critical time?
As you said, it is a critical time, so it is very important that Egypt presents its new role as a regional power, because this is what we have lost for so many years and that the present leadership is trying to bring back. We have been totally disengaged from so many issues, whether they are African or whether they are Arab and so on. So now there is a new re-engagement of Egypt at all levels. And this is what the presence of the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the head of the Security Council this month will try to reinforce the idea of Egypt is back on the international scene.
Yes.
Then the several visits that we have seen this past month are justifying what I'm saying now, that there is a need for Egypt to recapture the leadership role that it had lost in the past 30 years.
Yes. Dr. Abeid, now, there has been a lot of criticism targeting the UN as a body and as an institution in general, also the UN Security Council not really being as effective as everyone is hoping it would be. So should we really not expect a lot of practical, strong decisions being made by the UN Security Council? Not necessarily because Egypt is heading it or not, but should we expect that maybe some strong decisions, practical, conclusive decisions, coalitions being formed, any sort of a strong move being made by the UN Security Council, or should we just look at it in terms of really an honorary post that Egypt is gaining by heading the UN Security Council this month?
Well, it all depends. You know, if you raise important issues, and there are so many issues today, whether it is Syria, whether it is the refugees, and we take whether it's the Palestinian conflict that has been going on for so long. These are many issues that interest the world, and where the UN was not very active in the past years, as you have justly said. So it would be great if Egypt today can give it a boost. You know, even if it doesn't it doesn't bring sudden implementation of whatever you're going to suggest, but the fact that Egypt today is suggesting practical solutions or practical ways of dealing with it. You don't deal only security-wise with a conflict like Syria or with a conflict like with the Islamic State. You need to have another vision. You need to have another dimension. You need to have a cultural dimension. You need to change the mindset of people today. It is not just to bomb people and to bomb, every day we bomb some new territories or some new cities and so on, and we cause so many civil casualties. So I think that Egypt has always been, a bellwether in the region. And people had listened. to it. And today there is a need for Egypt. There is a need for an active role for Egypt. There is a need for, how to bring peace in the region, how to manage reconciliations between warring countries and warring factions, and so on. So these are the issues that should be discussed, really, and particularly the refugee issue and the Syrian issue.
Yes. Dr. Mona Makram Abeid, former member of Parliament and professor of political science at the American University in Cairo, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, now, Egypt has been really doing a lot of visits receiving a lot of visits, and a lot of cooperation agreements have been signed, not just with Arab countries and Gulf countries, but also we've been working on this earlier on with France, with Russia, with China. So we have been really paving the way for heading the UN Security Council. It could be seen as that, paving really the way, really gaining all the strength and the momentum that we can have going into the UN Security Council and heading it this month. Should we expect strong suggestions by Egypt in the UN Security Council? Should we expect some sort of prioritizing issues when Egypt is actually presenting all the issues to the UN Security Council? You've mentioned the Palestinian cause, the Libyan crisis, the crisis in Syria, what's happening in Nigeria. There are many issues that are taking place. Do you think Egypt will prioritize these issues when they're addressing the UN Security Council?
Let us put the facts first. I think the Security Council is run by the 5 permanent members. Unless we have agreement between those 5 members, no issue will pass. This is a fact. So any permanent member can say no or veto, then the resolution will stop there at the moment. But the president or the other non-permanent members, by convincing the other members, the permanent members, this issue is very important. This is would endanger the security, the world security or safety, the world security and security of the international world. So I think by deliberation and convincing, negotiating the issues, this is the main role which the non-permanent countries, including Egypt, as the president, will. This is not a tiny task. This is a very important issue, and this is a very important task to take over. But to convince the members that we have neglected the Palestinian issue for a quite time. This is very important. Unless we have a solution to this cause, the instability in the Middle East will go on. And in the other issues, African issues or the dismantling of Syria or Libya or whatever, this is very, very important issues to the Middle East region. And it is a danger to the security of all members of state members in the region. So I think by deliberations and negotiating and convincing the other members, including, of course, the permanent members of the Security Council, this is the role the President of the Security Council, which is a non-permanent member, and the other non-permanent members of the Security Council can play.
Yes.
Otherwise, the Security Council, unfortunately, by the 1946 agreement in San Francisco, put this role or the main role in the Security Council in the hands of the permanent members.
Yes, well, speaking of the permanent members, you've raised a very important point, which is how well are we in relations with the 5 permanent members? Who would we be having on our side? Who would be opposing us? How much of an agreement are we with the 5 permanent members?
Fortunately enough, we have very good relations with the 5 members. We have strategic relationship with the United Nations, with the United States. We have very good relations with Russia and China. The other members, I think, United Kingdom and France. France is also supporting the Arab cause and the United Kingdom as well. So I think we have, with the 5 members of the Security Council, we have very good relation. But if they are going to play a role to support our causes, this is going to their internal policies. The Congress, for instance, the Congress in the United States plays a very important role to shape up the U.S. policy towards the Middle East, influenced by organizations like AIPAC and all those, NGOs in America.
Yes. Well, a lot of political observers are actually saying, well, it is known Egypt has very good relations with China, with Russia, with France. However, the U.S. administration and the United Kingdom, yes, it is a good relationship with both countries, but these are the places or the 2 countries that we could expect some sort of a debate taking place. We're really not going to go far to saying a veto, but some sort of an opposition or a resistance coming from the 5 permanent members. Most likely it could be the United States and the UK. Would that be true?
Unfortunately, no. Because we have a very strategic relationship with the United States. It is not reflected in the media. It is not reflected in the newspapers, local newspapers in Egypt. But it goes far beyond that.
Yes.
We have very, very steady relationship between the Egyptian army or the Egyptian armed forces and the United States armed forces. This is one thing. We have so many points of, not of confrontation, but of agreement between our policy and the United States vis-à-vis terrorism, vis-à-vis the situation in the Middle East.
Yes.
You see, let alone the Palestinian question because of the influence of Israel but we have very important strategic relationship with the United States, which has been run for at least 30 years.
Decades, yes.
So it is not reflected in the, but the vice versa may be reflected, but it does not, reflect the true image of the relationship between Egypt and the United States. The same criterion goes with the United Kingdom. We have a very historical relationship with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom was the imperial power in Egypt.
Yes.
You see, so I think what we see in the newspapers or in the media does not reflect the true image of our relationships with the permanent members of the United Security Council.
Yes. Well, Ambassador Dr. Borhan, because we're running out of time, but I need to ask this question, going back to the Egyptian Parliament and the Pan-African Parliament. Now, one issue that we've been repeatedly asking and talking about on this show with you as well is the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia. Do you feel that the government is still really debating and is not really, things are not as smooth as everyone would hope it would be regarding this issue? Do you feel that the Egyptian Parliament, along with the Pan-African Parliament, can have some sort of an influence on this issue?
Maybe. I say maybe between 2 brackets. Because we have even a delegation from the parliament has visited either the parliament or the NGOs, Egyptian before the establishment of the new parliament, has visited Addis Ababa and has talked with the people there and with the parliamentarians there and with politicians there, and they came back with a good omen. But things has changed now, you see. Unfortunately, we have not clear idea what is the policy of Egypt towards the Al-Nahda Dam. Because we have been receiving conflicting ideas. The dam, it was 40 feet height, and then it became 70 feet. What will be the stand of Egypt towards this issue? This might affect the flow of water, the Nile water coming to Egypt and Sudan. So I think we have to have a clear policy, steady policy, steady, fast policy between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Irrigation, and other organs of the government. They have to sit down to put policy. If that happens, our reaction will be that. If that happens, our reaction will be this. So I think this is what we need at the moment, because not only the people of Egypt are unaware of what is happening in there. The division of public opinion it is running, not towards the Al-Nahda Dam, towards other issues. You see, Regini, for instance, what happens lately of the two islands. So the government has to, to assemble the public opinion behind its policies, to have clear, transparent policies. This is what we need.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of political developments taking place, mainly the Egyptian parliament being part of the Pan-African Parliament again after 3 years. Also, Egypt is heading the UN Security Council this month, a very important political step taken by Egypt within the UN Security Council and the international community. We're going to be following up the developments of Egypt's presidency of the UN Security Council here on The Daily Debate. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of our show. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Ambassador Dr. Samir Borhan, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.